Hello, everyone. My name is Diane. I'm Emerge's Development Director. Thank you so much for tuning in to our weekly interview series with women elected officials. We're so excited to be joined by Emerge Nashville School Board member Freda Player-Peters, who is also the Executive Director of Emerge Tennessee. She is an organizer and is deeply connected to her community in Nashville. She represents the 7th District on the Metro Nashville School Board, where she chairs the Budget and Finance Committee. Freda, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Wonderful. Well, I just want to jump right into the questions. Of course, tragically, COVID-19 has had a devastating impact on every community, and elected officials have been on the front lines of helping families and communities through this time. How has the pandemic affected Tennessee in particular, and what have you been doing as a member of the school board to support your community?
I think the main thing is making sure kids had access to be able to receive education. One of the big things we did during the pandemic and currently, make sure every student had a device so they can do virtual learning. We didn't have one-to-one devices for our students. So that was the first thing, like we really had to make sure that students had access to technology and access to the internet. So that was the first thing that we did. And then also we had what we called navigators. So we had people to call and check up on the children and check up on their parents and say, hey, what's going on? Are you handling everything okay? Do you have the equipment you need? Do you need a hotspot? Do you need food? With the economy kind of going downwards, what can we do to support you? And so that's one thing that was very important, that how do you provide some level of social emotional learning, given that you're in a virtual environment. So that was one of the main things that it was really important to us to make sure first kids were fed, because we're in a minority majority district. We have quite a few students who are either at or near the poverty line. And so we'll make sure, and especially students being furloughed, and it's Nashville, so we're the music city. A lot of parents are in the music business or in the service industry, and so that was shut down, or a lot of people were furloughed. So to make sure students had just food and their families had food, not just the students also. So that's one thing we just want to make sure to stabilize, people's health, and that was really the main thing. And then try to make sure that they had access to healthcare and things like that. So it was kind of a difficult time because you had some parents who really want to go back in school that came from a very privileged position, and you had others that needed daycare because we're also a healthcare hub. And so we have several hospitals that's based here in Nashville. And so we had to make sure that those who work in the hospitals, they had a safe place to put their kids. So making sure that we can just triage the immediate needs. And so that's the main thing that we did, make sure kids were fed. They had some type of connection to a staff person for social emotional support, and then make sure they had a safe place to learn if they couldn't do it in their own homes.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your efforts there. And can you elaborate a little bit about what you think the biggest challenges that your students and teachers are facing?
It's just re-entering into kind of the real world space. You spend all this time in a virtual space, and then you go in person. So how do you deal with continued COVID cases, because COVID still exists, even though there's vaccinations going on. So how do you maintain that? How do you teach kids protocols? Understand that, especially little babies, you have kindergartens that want to hug on one another and touch their teachers, and understanding you got to try to keep that to a minimum because they're craving that, that motion, that interaction. And so just kind of getting them to used to being masked, being back in person, being with their friends, and how do you manage that and try to get back into the rhythm of learning, particularly in person. So that's been the main aspect, to make sure people still feel safe, they have the PPE that they need, but then also how do you adjust to a new learning environment where you used to be working in groups and being close together and everyone's spread out. So that's been the biggest challenges. And then make sure we can be able to continue this into next year. And so also making up, we're having summer programs where students can come and make up for there hasn't really been a true learning loss, but what we're discovering is that kids aren't maintaining what they learned this year. So they haven't lost learning from one year to the next, but what they learned maybe in September, they're starting to forget just because of the brain fog and being cooped up. And so how do we maintain that? So when they go into next year, there's not a true learning loss. So we're trying to rectify that. So hopefully with the summertime, they can spend more time with their friends, but then also they can have some fun learning and go into the next year in a better place than they were if we didn't have those resources available.
Yeah, absolutely. That is so key. And to hear that you're trying to rectify all these issues in your community is really inspiring. As the chair of the Budget and Finance Committee, what are your top priorities?
How do we leverage the CARES Fund Act, they're called ESSER funds in the education world, to make sure that what we use, we don't create what we call a financial cliff. So we bring in, perfect example, we grew up with school nurses in every school, but our school district, we have 85,000 kids, 10,000 employees, 162 buildings. And so we didn't have a school nurse for every school building before the pandemic, but we're able to leverage those CARES funds and put a school nurse. So like our biggest concern is that we're putting these people in, but what happens when the money expires? Can we still fund their positions because students still need access to healthcare? So things like that. But then also pre-pandemic, we were having some funding challenges and we made cuts after cuts after cuts. And we're at the point where we can't cut anymore. And so how do we encourage the mayor, how do we encourage the city council to give us the funding we need to make sure that we can educate kids to the level that they're expected to learn? And that takes real investment and it's not cheap. Our budget's $933 million. And then we're asking for at least another $977 million for next year. And that's just to maintain the same level of service. That's not doing anything new. That's not bringing new programs in. So really educating the community of saying, this is what it takes to educate our kids in the 21st century. And so that's kind of our biggest challenge, to understand to the other government entities that we can't cut anymore. We've been cutting and cutting and cutting. And now we're at the point where we have to invest or we're going to lose the quality of learning, because at this point, we can't cut anymore. And any meaningful cut's going to be in the classroom, because we cut everything down. We even cut down the amount of trash pickup we have across the district. Like we've cut every little thing that we can. And so to make sure that we have the teachers we need, that we pay the teachers that they deserve, and that we can retain them, because teachers have been worn out. This has been a very tough year. And so we got to show that they're worth their weight in gold and then some, that what they've been doing, and that the teaching protocols that we put in place, that they're here and they're worth it and we want to invest in them.
Absolutely. And I do think teachers are doing God's work. So any support that they can have is so key. And you, as I mentioned before, lead our program in Tennessee, which you co-founded, and you've run for office yourself. What advice would you give to other women who are thinking about running for office?
First, I always say, go to the meeting where you want to run. So if you run for school board, sit in a school board meeting and sit from beginning to end. Because a lot of times we see the fun parts, but it's really like, is it really as sexy as I think it is? I've seen some people run for office and they get there and they're like, oh, I don't like it. This is not what the office I entail. So really get to know the office. And then also believe in yourself. Someone just as smart, some people not as smart, particularly men, have done it. You can do it too. It's one of those things that you're only going to learn so much until you get into the job. And when you get into the job, there will be people there to support you. Your fellow colleagues will support you because it benefits the whole. To everyone be successful, you have staff to help support you, that you can do it. And just learn to ask a lot of questions and be transparent as much as possible. Don't be afraid to take a stand. Most people get mad at you for not taking a stand. And if you did, but just explain why you did it. Say, this is the information I had. This is why I did it. And this is what my values are. And this is how I made my decision. And 9 out of 10 times, people are going to respect that. They may not like it, but they'll respect it. And they know you, they can trust you. But you can do it. It's hard work, but it's the most rewarding experience when you see those kids succeed and really do the good work. It pays off for all the long days going door to door, hot in the sun, or making phone call after phone call after phone call, or getting on the phone and asking for money. All of that work will be worth it when you realize you improved a child's life or you improved a citizen's life. So go ahead and do it. Take the leap. It's one of those things. It's scary. And I tell people, if you're not scared, then you're not doing it right, or you're not in it for the right reasons. But use that energy to really bring out the best in yourself, and people will respond and people will really support you and admire you for actually doing it. So the first leap is big, but the water warms up really quickly.
Absolutely. I love that. And also due to the pandemic, we've also seen so many of our alums need to pivot their strategies and tactics and how they run for office, and even your program as well. So how have you sort of seen that change from pre-pandemic to post-pandemic campaigning and running for office?
So a lot more online forums. That was the biggest thing. Like there was times we were doing 2 a night. So that was the big thing. Well, which is also great because it makes it more accessible. I mean, when you do door to door, when you do phone banking, you have to allot so much time to do that in a critical mass. But with the forums, you can really engage different people and people that you normally wouldn't engage anyway, because then they have set time and you're not trying to miss people and make appointments. So that's one of the great things about running in a kind of pandemic space is the accessibility that you can do a lot more forums because you're not traveling, you're not trying to juggle schedules. You just literally click from one link to another to another. So I think that's one good thing. And then people are really open to learn. Like the direct mail was very effective. I realized I actually got responses back from my direct mail, and that was interesting to get cards in the mail. I was like, thank you for your letter. That was so thoughtful. I appreciate your letter. So like things like that, where traditionally where direct mail had to be layered on top things, it really was much more effective this time because people look forward to getting their mail and people actually have time to read their mail. So it's very doable in a pandemic. You have to adjust for certain things, but you can also reach more people because of the online technology that's there.
Great. And what would you say to a woman who has never run for office before, but is considering the Emerge program? And what would you do to sort of convince her that she should join Emerge and be a sister?
Yes. Well, great thing Emerge does is two things. I mean, we obviously do the technical aspect, which you can get from many training programs. But what makes Emerge unique, that you have a network. You have a sisterly bond with your cohort that really support you when you're down, when you're having a tough day, or you had a frustrating day with your opponent. You can pick up the phone, you can pick up and text or call your Emerge sister and say, hey, I had a terrible day. My opponent said this about me, and it wasn't true. And you have someone to really just kind of vent to and support you. And then you also have ones that are not running. They'll come and do phone calls from you. They'll write checks to you. They'll go do forums and campaign for you. So you really get a network. And then Emerge also answers those fears that you may have. Like, what do I do about my kids? What do I do about my family? How do I manage and balance my work, my family, and my campaign? Emerge really touches on those intangible questions that you can't get from a technical online training. So we do the technical, but we also provide that emotional support and answer those emotional questions that run around that the things that actually make you nervous about running. We give you a space to have that nervousness, to talk it out, and then also give you the support and encouragement to do it. And that's what makes us unique from any other training program that I've been a part of in the past and that I see currently out there in the universe.
Absolutely. The sisterhood is real. So Freda, thank you so much for joining us today and being part of this episode of Emerge at Work. Please subscribe to our channel and hear of more great conversations with Emerge leaders across the country. Again, thank you so much and have a wonderful day.
All right. Thank you. See everyone.